Hey everyone, and welcome to Kaswell's Kappa, the channel where you learn how to work on your Kappa step by step. In today's video, we're going to learn how to replace your shock absorbers with some BC Racing Coilovers. These are a factory replacement, or honestly an aftermarket replacement, but they're meant to surpass the factory shock absorbers. They got little tuners in them as well, which is pretty cool. So I'm going to show you how to install these step by step, and you can also use this procedure to replace your factory shock absorbers with some more factory ones if you need to. I'll provide you everything step by step, pages from the service manual, part numbers, the whole shebang. So without further ado, let's get to it. Now before we get into this video, I do want to go over a couple of things. First off, right off the bat, you can tell this is an hour-long video. Why is that? You've never made a video this long. Well, in my videos, obviously, they're step-by-step tutorials on how to replace parts, right? Every segment takes about a minute or so, you know. But the main reason this video is going to be so long is it's basically you're watching the whole process step by step, and this is about how long it's going to take you to do this video roundabout, if not just a tad bit more. So if you got a video that's about 30 minutes, that's about how long it's going to take you to do that procedure. Now, second, the reason it's so long, it's both the front and the back. So you're spending 30 minutes on the front, 30 minutes on the back, you know. So that's one thing. Second thing I want to talk about, this recording process was probably the most infuriating recording process I have ever had. I mean, I've had this sitting in my back pocket for 4 months now. That's a long time. Usually I do the recording process a week ahead of my posting schedule, if not maybe a couple of weeks, depending on if I'm lazy that week or not. No, I've had this in my back pocket for 4 months, and the reason that's done that is because of the setbacks and the accidents and the roadblocks that have happened in this video. And at that time, over the past 4 months, my view on that was an unprofessional look. But now that I've had it in my back pocket for 4 months, I see it a little differently now. It's more of a, how do I say this? It's more of a, it's real. You see the issues that I experienced, and I explain the issues that I have in the video as well, and you'll see that. But now I see it as more of, it's just part of the process, you know, and it's just showing how real it is, which is exactly what I want it to be, you know. That's part of the process of replacing parts. And then the last thing, the third thing, part in the whole process of the recording deal, one of the issues that happened was I wasn't able to get a video of the brake caliper, so I'm pulling a piece of the wheel hub video where I do the caliper on there. I just bring that one over. So that's the last thing, and now we can get back to the video. Thanks for being patient. Alright, now before we start this procedure, we got to make sure we have these certain things: jack stands, jack pucks for the jack, your jack of course down there. You got to make sure you have your wheel chocks, make sure your parking brake is on. If you're an automatic, make sure you're in park. If you're a manual, make sure you're in first gear. Make sure your vehicle is not gonna move. You don't want to hurt yourself while doing this, because you're most likely going to be inside the wheel wells while you're doing this procedure. So once again, wheel chocks, parking brake, first gear or park, jack stands, jack, and jack pucks. Make sure you have all these. Now that we know that, we can get to work. Alright, so we're going to start on the driver's side here. First things first, we need to raise the vehicle up and take that wheel off. Now there's two possible jacking locations that you can use, but I will only use one for this specific procedure, and I'll show you why here in a second. So right behind the fender, right behind this portion right here, as you can see, I have a jack pad right here. It's a little chewed up. Actually, this is the one I need to replace. You see how wiggly that is? I got to replace that. But this is still fine. So this is the jacking point. It is right behind the fender, the swoop. And then the official, I mean, this is still an official jack point. But there is, where is my lower control arm? I'm looking at everything from the side. So right over here, right here is another jacking point, but there's a reason I'm not using that, and it's because we got to mess with the lower control arm later on. So I'm not going to use that one. I will use it as a jack stand though. So I'm going to use this one right here. And if you don't have a jack buck, I highly recommend y'all get them. It'll save you so much heartache from busting up the fenders. So now that we found this, we can jack up the vehicle. Alright, now before we do lift the vehicle, we do need to loosen the lug nuts. This will take a 19mm or a 3/4 socket. I typically use a 3/4 because it seems to be a little bit tighter fit, but if your lug nuts are swollen, I'd use a 19mm. The 3/4 might be a little tight if your lugs are swollen from over tightening. So, but for this video, I'm using a 3/4, and don't forget your breaker bar. Tightening, loosening. This way. I am a little guy too, so this takes a little bit of oomph. Alright, just like that, they are loosened. Now we can lift the vehicle. Alright, so now that the vehicle is lifted, I do want to show y'all something. If you check this out here, as you can see, the back tire's coming up just a tad bit. This is because I have DDM Works backbone brace, so this gives the vehicle some strong rigidity, and it keeps the vehicle from twisting. So with how rigid it is, even though I'm lifting it from the front, it's lifting up the back as well. So if you're not on a stable surface, be very careful, and I would hesitate doing this procedure unless you were on a level surface. Also, don't forget wheel chocks and jack stands. You don't want to hurt yourself, so keep that in mind. Alright, so now that we got the vehicle up and the wheel is able to freely spin, we can take off our lug nuts. I don't have I mean, I do have like a driver, but this is a lot smaller, so I like to use this random contraption that I got here. It's a little gyroscopic DeWalt drill bit. It only spins whenever you turn it, so it works at all angles, so it's pretty cool. But all this is just a bunch of extensions because this is a inch drive, or not an inch drive, a half-inch drive. It's a half-inch drive socket, so that's why I have this contraption. Come on. Let's put you on the bottom here. There we go. Alright. Now we can take our tire. If you've just been driving, be careful. It may be hot, especially the rotor. I'm just going to lift it off just like so. Oh, and out of the way. Alright, so now that the wheel is off, I'm going to show you where I'm going to put my jack stand. So if we come take a look-see in here, we have the bottom portion of the lower control arm. This is an official jack point. Now, I would put my jack stand underneath here, but still a little too shy. So I'm going to lift it up just a hair so I can slide that down, and that way I have a nice fallback. You always want to have jack stands so that you don't hurt yourself. It's an insurance policy. You don't need to lose your life over this. So I'm going to lift this up a little bit and get the jack stand under there. Alright, so to remove the brake caliper assembly, the whole thing, there's only two bolts we need to remove. They're both 15mm bolts coming in here. We got our first bolt right here, right up top, And then our second bolt is right back yonder. Right there. So right up top, and then right back yonder. So there will be 15mm bolts. And whenever you do remove the assembly, remember you got your brake line that's connected here. Let's see. You got your brake line that's connected right here. So you want to make sure you have ample room to set that down, or find something to set it on, because this will take the whole thing and it'll yank it out, and then you're going to work on something else. So yeah, make sure to get something to support your caliper when you set it down. There should be enough room, but if it's lifted up on anything, you're going to want to have that there. So there's that. Alright, so we're going to take off these two bolts here. Hopefully that's focused in. Camera's kind of in a weird spot, but remember, these are 15mm. Let's see, lefty loosey. Good lord, these are on there. Okay. Yeah, those are in there. Okay. There's that one. Let me go at it from this angle. There we go. Come on. Woo-hoo-hoo. Yeah, good grief. Most of y'all are probably thinking I need to eat a sandwich. No, I've had too many sandwiches. I'm getting a belly. That's not good. I don't need a belly yet. I'm not ready to be old. Oh, come on. There we go. Alright. That's what I want. Can you loosen you yet? Yeah. Okay. Alright. Might be a little hard to see for y'all, but sorry about that. Alright, now remember, you need to hold your caliper assembly. I'm going to get it to where it's just about to come off. And then, that's the wrong way. And then I'm going to show you how I take it off. That way it's not just falling. Okay, right there I'm going to stop, and I'm going to switch the camera angle now. So now we can see the brake caliper. Hopefully I don't get camera view or cause it to be unfocused. So I'm going to hold this and support it while I loosen this. Alright, so there's the bolt. I'm currently supporting the full weight of the caliper. Yep, that's what I'm talking about. Take it, slide it out, and slowly set it down. See if I have room. Yeah, I got enough room. Alright, so the caliper is out of the way. I set it down here. Alright, so here we have our tire or rotor facing this way. And if we come down in here, as we can see, we have our lower control arm system in our knuckle. So here, if we take a look, we have the lower control arm, the knuckle, a 13/16 nut, and what I believe to be a 3/16 Allen up here. This is to keep the ball joint from spinning while you're loosening the nut. Now, in order to undo this whole system, you need a ball joint separator. This is a Kent Moore ball joint separator. It comes with a long screw, the piece that connects underneath the knuckle, and then this goes on top of that nut and Allen system. This is for the Allen. As you can see, it's got a hex. Let's see if I can focus on that. Maybe not, but anyways, there you go. So it has a hex. This is to go on top of your Allen system, just like so, while you undo the nut, and this keeps the ball joint still. And to use this, we're going to take the knuckle piece. This is also why this whole thing's tilted. Come in here underneath the knuckle. I'm going to slide it in like so. Kind of tap it in a little bit. And I know it's a little unfocused. I apologize for that. It's a cramped area and the camera don't like to focus sometimes. Come in here. This place right here, you can see it's got a hole in the top portion of this part of the tool. It's going to slide up there. And as you can see, the holes line up, and that's where the screw will go in place. And then you tighten it, and it forces that ball joint out of the knuckle. So now that we know how that works, we can go through the process and show you how we do this. Alright, so as I said, this is a 13/16, so I'm going to go ahead and grab that, slide it on like so. I'm going to take this little Allen, set that guy in place, and I'm going to hold him still while I loosen this nut. Now this is a little tedious, so I'm going to fast forward through this while I do this. And it was already pre-loosened a little bit. Like I said, I had a little bit of a mishap whenever I was recording. But anyway, so we're going to get this loosened here, and we'll be right back. Alright, so now we're going to be separating our lower control arm and our ball stud from the knuckle. So go ahead and take, like I said, take that bottom piece, slide it in there, make sure it's in there good. Take this top piece, and as you can see, I don't have it barely hanging on. I have it, the ball joint thread, just barely underneath the top so that it still has a good grip, because I don't want this going anywhere, and I don't want to strip any threads. So whenever you take this screw here, make sure to oil it up with some kind of DW40, or sometimes if you buy these, it comes with special lubricant. Make sure to use that, because this will be some high pressure, and you do not want to strip the threads on this thing at all. So make sure to do that. So I'm going to be using DW40. I don't really have any other kind of oil on me at the moment, and this should be sufficient enough. Okay. So there we go. I got my threads oiled up a little bit. Now I'm going to take my top portion of the ball joint separator. I'm going to slide this through here. Make sure everything's all nice and lined up. Yeah, man. Oh, there we go. Just spinning the wrong way. You're going to want to get it nice and tight and in the right spot. If you have a screw gun, it makes it a whole lot easier. Also, the hex for this screw, it's a 15/16. I unfortunately forgot my 15/16, so I'm going to be using a crescent wrench on this, but I highly recommend using an actual socket, not a crescent wrench, because you'll be able to get way more leverage. If this doesn't work, I'm going to have to go grab a 15/16, which is across town. But for the moment, we're just going to do it with crescent wrench. So I'm going to speed this up here and cut to where we start separating this. Alright, so we're nice and snug. As you can see, it's not going to be perfect. It's still going to stick out a little bit. So be careful when doing this, because there's going to be a lot of tension in here. You don't want this popping off and hitting you. So let's go ahead and start getting to where we separate this here a little bit. Using my crescent wrench, I'm going to tighten this until it forces it out. Alright, so I wanted to show y'all something real quick. So I was having an issue whenever I was trying to separate the ball joint, down here by the way. Whenever I was trying to separate the ball joint, it wouldn't separate, and it was just bending the tool. It was like it was in a bind, and I'm like, what is going on here? So I finally took the wheel and I turned it to the left, and it turns out I had it so far over, even though the service manual called for it, I had it so far over that I was putting everything in a bind. And as you can see here, you see how that ball joint's moving now? The Allen up here, it's moving now. It's because I had it so over to the right, the ball joint was it was turned, and it was putting itself in a bind on the knuckle. So now that I moved it over, there's a loud pop, and everything's now free. So now that that's done, I'm going to go ahead and take this nut off, and we can finally get to business. That's loosened. Whoops. Come on. Alright. Wrap off there. Let's see if we can just pop this guy out. Alright, yep, see, just like that. So that's now free. Now all I gotta do is, now that that's free, I'm gonna take this knuckle. We're gonna lift the knuckle up and away from the lower control arm. Alright, so now that the whole lower ball joint assembly has been separated, we can move on to the shock absorber. As you can see, I've already loosened the nuts here. These are 13mm, and what's special about these is that it's not just the bolts. There are nuts on the bottom here. So as you can see, there are some nuts that are connected to these. So whenever you do this, you're going to have two different 13mm nuts. You're going to have one up top, one up on bottom. That way you can loosen them instead of just the nut spinning and you're not going anywhere. So one up top, one on bottom, loosen those. As you can see, they're going to start getting stiff. It's because the shock absorber is pushing down on them, and what you'll have to do is you'll have to grab something and you'll have to bang it out. You'll have to slowly push it out, and then it's going to scoot forward. After that, we're going to release the bolts up here. I don't remember what the size are, but we're going to get to that after we get these bolts out. So let's go ahead and do that. Alright, so as we can see here, you can see where the shock absorber was sitting and where it's at now, and it's clearly shifted forward. This is why I was putting pressure on it and why it couldn't move. Now that it's pushed down a little bit, it's still not free. We still have to remove the other bolts as well, and later on we'll be moving the knuckle up a little bit, and so on. So now that that's done, we can go to the top of the frame and remove these bolts. Alright, so now that we're at the top of the engine on the passenger side, look underneath the power steering fluid, and right here is the top of our shock absorber. Now, you see this center nut right here? Don't touch that nut. You touch that nut, you will die. I'm just kidding. But no, seriously, don't touch that. When you undo that, the whole spring assembly comes apart, and that's not good. The ones we do want to touch is this one right here, and then there's another one under this side. I have an aftermarket liner, so this nut's kind of hidden. You can see it from underneath right here, right there. But if you have a OEM, it may be more visible. But anyways, we have to undo those two nuts right there. And these two, I believe they are still 13mm. So now that we know where they're at, we can remove them. Alright, so I finally got those two nuts off, and it was a hassle. I went ahead and removed these out of the way so that the liner wasn't being held on by them. I also had to remove this bolt, that bolt, this bolt, and then these two. That way I could try to scrunch it up a little bit and then force its way over that nut there. And in order to reach those, I also had to take off this 10mm nut on the power steering reservoir. That way I could make a little bit more room to get to those. So these are also 15mm nuts, by the way. They're not 13, they are 15mm. So now that those are done, we can move on to the next step. Alright, so everything is in place. Now we're ready to remove the shock absorber. Steering is tilted to the right, and both the nuts are removed. Now what the service manual says to do is we have to raise the steering knuckle and the upper control arm while taking the shock absorber, moving it down and out towards the rear. I do have a problem with that though, because this is still in a bind. It's not moving anywhere. So I guess during this process we'll raise it up, see if it can't free it somehow. If it doesn't completely remove that from the knuckle, if it does help, then that's what we needed to do in the first place, was remove that completely, not just separate it. So we're going to now raise this up and see how this goes. Alright, so now I'm going to raise the knuckle and try to do something about the shock absorber. So what I'm going to do, grab down here by the adjustment link, and I'm going to lift by that and by the top of the knuckle. And it may separate down here. If anything, that's probably what we need. So let's see what happens. Oh, that's as far as that's going to go. Let's see here. Oh, yep, that's as far as that's gonna go. Yeah, so that's pretty stuck. What I may need to do, I may need to turn the steering wheel a little bit, see if that unjams it. Let me see here. Yeah, because that's in a little bit of a bind now. Let me turn the steering wheel a bit and see if that helps out a bit. Yep. That's what I wanted. Alright, so we finally got that shock absorber loose. So what we had to do here is, of course I had a second jack. So the shock absorber, because of how old it is, the older it is, the more worn it is, the more stiff it's going to be, and the longer it's going to be because it's putting out more pressure, right? So because it's more stiff. So what I ended up doing is this thing, whenever you loosen it, it's going to get stuck. It's not going to come off here, and it's mainly because of this little jerk right here, that little. Anyways, so what I had to do is I took another jack and I lifted it, and I barely put it on the corner here enough to get over this little hump, and this whole thing went clunk clunk clunk, and it shifted forward, and now we are free. And of course the steering knuckle has been removed. That way we can lift it up, and we can now take this out from the side. So I'm going to lift this up and move this out to the side so that we can get this undone. Finally, I spent like an hour on this crap. Alright, so I'm going to lift this up, move this out. It's going to be fun. Alright, there we go. There's the old strut. Alright, so here is our BC Racing Coil. A couple things here. Whenever you're reading the instruction manuals for this thing, this is known as a non-McPherson or non-McPherson strut. So it will be the second type in the instructions handbook. There's no clevis spring or anything like that. Second of all, as you can see, there are 3 adjustment knobs here, and you're also going to be given some adjustment tools. These two are to remain tight against each other at all times. This is the spring seat. This is the adjustment spring, I believe is what it's called. Let me see here. D is the locking collar. Okay, so this is the spring seat. This is the locking collar. And then this one right here, B, this is the bottom locking ring. So this is a locking ring, this is a locking ring, and then this is the spring seat. These are to remain tight at all times. Whenever you increase the ride height or want to lower it, adjust it, whichever, you're going to loosen this to where it's loose, and then you can adjust these. Just make sure you never loosen these. These are always to remain tight at all time. When it comes to showing you how we adjust the ride height, I'll show you whenever this is installed into the vehicle, but I just want to make this clear. These are to remain tight, and then this is what you loosen. So now that we've gone over the basics for that, we can go to installing it. Alright, so when it comes to installing this spring, this bottom, as you can see, it's adjustable. You can raise it, you can lower it, so it makes it pretty easy to adjust this to where it just slides right in, unlike the original strut. You know how we had that problem? Yeah, that's up. So now we're going to slide this in here, just like so. And because we can adjust the height on it, it can just sit right there for the moment. I don't got to worry about nothing. And I can always adjust it later. I'm going to go ahead and lock this bottom collar. That way it don't move and it keeps the shape. I'm going to grab the 2 bolts that I had for the lower. I'm going to go ahead and stick those in for now, just so that it keeps its shape. And then I'm going to grab the 2 upper nuts. Sorry about that. And then I'm going to go grab the upper 2 nuts, and I'm going to tighten those as well, just to get them snug. That way everything is in place. And then we can put our knuckle back onto our lower control arm. Alright, now just to show y'all something here, since it was a little small when I put it in, I do have to increase the ride height of the spring in order for it to fully insert into the top nuts, because right now you just have a little bit sticking out, and if you try to tighten that, it's going to stretch everything, and you don't need that. You want it right to where it needs to be. You don't want to mess up your new shocks. So I'm taking this tool here. This is what you're going to use to adjust the deals, and to remember to raise it, you want to turn the bottom one. This is the bottom locking nut, and you're turning this counterclockwise. So you know how a clock rolls this way? You want it going that way. So you're going to turn it left as if you're loosening it. And that's going to increase the ride height. So that is what I'm doing now. Also, before you adjust these, make sure to apply DW40, some kind of lubrication, so that it's not just metal on metal. And this will help ease getting it up. And it'll help to where you don't strip the threads, because that's not good. I also wish there was a better way to do this, because this is kind of annoying. Because sometimes it slips a lot like that. So we got that in there nice and good. I got the bottom ones snug, and these top ones, I do want to make a quick note. As you can see, we have different nuts for the top ones. BC Racing includes new nuts for the top, but not for the bottom. So if you go to install this and you're like, why isn't this fitting? It's because they have new nuts. So make sure to take those off before you install these, otherwise it'll be underneath there and you got to take it all off again. So anyways, so we got those top nuts installed. They're not torqued down yet. As you can see, I have my extension there holding the wheel well against its wheel so that I can get to that nut. So now that that is done and they're all snug, we can get to torquing these on. Alright, and when torquing these down, it's 47 Newton meters or 35 foot-pounds. And yes, even though it is aftermarket nuts and an aftermarket part, you still need to torque this to spec. Alright, so that one's good. And there goes my socket. Told you, man, that wheel well is hard. And that one's done. Alright, now we're going to do the bottoms, and yes, because it's easier, I'm doing it from the bottom. Alright, just like that, the bottoms are done. Next, I'm going to get the knuckle on somehow. Whew, got it. Alright, now we can tighten it down. Alright, now I'm going to tighten the ball joint nut. Remember, it's a 13/16 until it's seated, or until the ball joint starts to spin, and then I'll use the tool and my crescent wrench. Alright, so now that we have this snug, as you can see, it's pretty much all the way up to the base there. So now we're going to grab our 13/16 and we're going to torque this to 40 Newton meters or 35 foot-pounds. Alright, so that's 40 Newton meters to 30 foot-pounds. Now we have to tighten this to 135 degrees. So this is kind of like a torque to yield, but it's mainly just to get it real snug. So we're going to go ahead and do that now. Alright, so now we're going to torque this to 135 degrees, and this is going to do a continuous beat, by the way. But anyways, this is to pretty much get it real snug, because it's kind of like a torque to yield, but it's not a torque to yield, it's just to get it real snug. So it's going to be beeping the whole time, so be prepared. And I do this in one foul swoop, but I can't because it's such a small space, so it's going to be done over a multiple swoop kind of thing. So here we go. So that's 38 degrees. That's 115. Alright. Okay, now that's 128. I'm sorry. Okay, a little more. Alright, there we go. Alright, now we're going to get our caliper on. Remember, be careful of the hose. Whenever I put this on, I'm going to try to do the top bolt first and then the bottom. If I can't do that, then I'll maybe try it the opposite way. Do the bottom first and then the top. So, let's get this on. Alright, get them in place. Yeah, man. Get it on there. Okay, that's not working. Let me do the bottom then. Okay. So there's the bottom. Now let me try the top. Yeah, there we go. Alright. So now that those are in loosey-goosey, I can get these snug and then we'll torque these on. Whew. Brace up against the rotor. Good lord. Alright, those are torqued down. Alright, now when we torque these on, it's going to be 115 Newton meters or 85 foot-pounds, I believe. This is going to be a 15 millimeter socket, remember that. So here we go. There's also a small space, so it's going to suck. Alright, so that one's good. So now that all this is done, we can go to put on our tire. Don't forget to remove your jack stand, and don't forget your tire and your lug nuts. And what I'll do is I'll usually take this and I will do a little star pattern. So let's say, you know, you got the top, the sides, and the bottoms. I'll go from the top right, and then I'll go to the bottom right, circle back up to the top left, move over to the top right, and then back down to the bottom left until it's completely seated. And I'll still show you how to do that, but that's typically how I do it. It helps keep the whole wheel fastened and completely seated. So we'll go ahead and start doing it. Alright, so I already got the top one in. So like I said, moving over to the bottom right. Push down the tire on the bottom, that way it stays seated. There. Move over to the very left. Alright, make sure that's in. Move over to the right. Make sure that's seated. And then to the bottom left. Okay, and now that those are all done, still keep it vertical from where you had it. Go back to the top. See how it could go a little more? Go back down to the bottom. Left. Good. Right. Good. In. Bottom. Good. Okay. So now that I've done that, what I'll usually do is I will typically grab like a little wrench or my breaker bar. I don't know where my breaker bar is at. Here it is. There it is. So grab my breaker bar just to get it a little more snug. Just to kind of get a little more snug. You don't have to do this. I like to do it just in case. That way it's got a little more bite on things. Just like so. And now that that's done, and remember, make sure your jack stands out of the way. Now that that's done, we can lower the vehicle. Alright, so now that the vehicle is lowered, we can torque this to spec. It's 100 foot-pounds of torque, and I'm not sure what the Newton meters is, but it is 100 foot-pounds of torque. And remember, we're going to do the star shape again. So starting from the top. 1. 2. To the left. 3. To the right. Oops. Good thing this is an old torque wrench. 4. Bottom left. 5. Once again, I'm going to do another pass just in case. Make sure everything's seated. 1. 2. 3. 4. 5. All right. On that second pass, this one and this one and this one, they all tightened a little more before they click. So that's why I do the second pass. Sometimes they're not tight enough or fully seated, and they'll need that extra little. Alright, so now that the front's done, we can work on the back. Once again, get your jack, make sure your wheels are chalked. Since we're doing the back now, make sure the front wheels are chalked and not the rear. You can chalk that whichever side is opposite you're working on. So right now I'm working on the right side, so we can chalk the left side, the left wheel, to make sure that it don't move. Once again, parking brake, first gear. Want to make sure you have those on, don't hurt yourself. So let's loosen these lug nuts. Remember, 3/4 or 19 millimeter, and then we can jack it up. Alright, now that those are loose, we can jack the vehicle up. Now when locating the jack point on the rear side, you have two options. Once again, the lower control arm, which I'm trying to avoid since I'm having to work in this area. And then two, right underneath this quarter panel in this spot, so not too far from the back, you'll have this area right here. As you can see, I have my jack puck already in place. I stick these in and I leave them, so these are real nice. These are actually BMW jack pucks for the E38 or the E36, one of the two. May actually be the E36. But anyways, that's going to be right there. So that is where I'm going to be jacking up the vehicle at this point. So now that I know where it's at, we can jack it up. Should be good. A little more. Alright, that's good. Of course it's not going to move because this is attached to the axle or the drive shaft, but this should be good. And now I can take these lug nuts off. Set the nuts to the side, grab my tire. Something I've noticed about the Skies is these will kind of, I don't know if it's just because of rust, but these will rust onto the threads, and they'll be hard to get off, especially after rain. I don't know why they're like that. Come on. Not even holding on anymore. There we go. Alright. Roll your tire off to the side. Right now the wheel is off, as we can see here. This is honestly probably why I have a hard time getting it off. This is hub-centric, if I remember right. I believe these are hub-centric, and so it grabs around the hub. And of course, if you got rust around there, you're gonna have a hard time getting that off. So now we're gonna be putting the jack stand on here. The jack stand can go under this one right here, that part of the lower control arm, and not this side down here, not right there. If you look at the schematics, you want to make sure to put it on this back one, because as you can see, it kind of connects to the frame here. Well, honestly, it's a Pro Beam, but there's still a frame running there. But anyways, you're going to want to put it on the bottom of this part right here. So that's where you're going to put that. So I'm going to grab my jack stand, put it underneath there, and if it don't fit, I'll lift it a little more. And once that's done, we can get to messing with this. Alright, so our jack stand is in place. Now we can go on to talk about the procedure. Obviously, a few things are different. We have the caliper up front, and you have a big space right here where we can see the shock absorber. So what do we need to do to remove it? Well, first off, we're not touching the caliper. We can leave that alone. Second, we're going to be jacking with the adjustment link here. This is also known as the tie rod. Now, when removing this tie rod, do not mess with this nut. This is your adjustment link. Do not mess with that. I repeat, do not. If you mess with that, it's going to throw off your alignment. Your steering's going to be wonky. You don't need that. What we're going to be messing with is what's connected to the knuckle, kind of like the lower control arm in the front. And as you can see here, we have a nut, and then we have a socket head up here. This bottom nut is 18 millimeter. This top one is an 8 millimeter. Now, I don't know what the SAE equivalents are for these, but the 18 millimeter, it fits, but it's still kind of loose. You can see that. The equivalent is an 11/16. That might be a little tighter. It is a bit smaller than an 18 millimeter, so it might bite better or have less play, but an 18 millimeter will work nonetheless. An 8 millimeter, it's a little tight up top. As you can see, it's a little tight, but it still fits. It's real snug, so this is almost like a perfect fit. An SAE might be a tad bit bigger. That'll be a 5/16. So 18 millimeter or 11/16, 8 millimeter or 5/16. Now, just like the first time, we're going to have to hold the head still while we loosen the nut. If you loosen the nut, it'll turn the whole ball joint, which the service manual says we don't need to do that. Some are designed to only move certain ways, and if it's moved, it can't move those certain directions, so we're going to be keeping this still. I don't have wrenches for this, so I'm going to have to use a crescent wrench. So now that we know how to do this and what we need to remove, let's get to removing it. Alright, now usually these are seized on there pretty good, so if you want to try your luck at just sticking a wrench in there and removing it, you're more than welcome to, which I'm going to try my luck here and see if it'll go without spinning. Let's see. Get my crescent wrench in there. Let's see. And cool. Looks like it's spinning without having to hold the top on. Now, if you were wanting to, let's say, loosen this while still holding the top, how you do that. So you're going to take your wrench. You're going to take your socket, just stick it right up top, like so. Hold it still while you loosen it, and that's all you're going to do. Now, if you have a ratcheting wrench, which I honestly thought this was going to be a 13/16, which I do have one of them, but it's not. It's an 18 millimeter, so I'm using a crescent wrench now. If you use a ratcheting wrench, it'll be a lot easier, but I don't, so this will be a little bit of a long process. So we're going to go ahead and skip forward here to where we've loosened it, and we're going to now disconnect it with the ball joint separator. Alright, so now this is loosened, we can go and put on our ball joint separator. This one is a lot easier to get to, unlike the lower control arm. So once again, slide it in place, get your top piece, kind of hammer it in place. You want to make sure it's underneath. I know it's kind of hard to see. Make sure it's underneath this portion of the knuckle, right underneath it. That way it pushes it out. Slide it up top, and we're going to tighten it here. And fast forward a little bit to where it's tightened a little more for y'all. Alright, so I got my ball joint separator in place. It's going to be a little different since you can't really move or adjust the wheel, kind of like how I did it with the first one, to get it out of a bind. So I'm not sure how much of a bind this may be in, if it is in one. But we're just going to shoot it and see what happens, which I'm already starting to get into a bind, and I don't like that. Yeah, I don't like that, actually. Alright, so I want y'all to take a look at something here. So, obviously, this is in a bind. There's no doubt about that. I will tell you, off camera, I used the ball joint. Even though you're not supposed to do this, I did try to twist the ball joint itself to see if that's loose, but this is actually in a bind as well. I even, honestly, almost sheared off the top. no bueno. But so I'm gonna do what I do, which is my Old Faithful. So this is my Old Faithful. This is my second jack. So what I'm gonna do is I'm going to lift the lower control arm, or just the whole knuckle in general. I'm going to lift the whole assembly, and what this will do is, you see how it has such an angle on that ball joint? I'm going to lift it up, and as I lift it up, it's going to widen that angle, and hopefully I can get my separator in there and it should pop right out. If not, I could probably take a hammer and whack it out. I don't want to do that, so right now I'm just going to lift it up, get that bind off of there, and then see if I can't get that off, because at the moment with how it is, the ball joint's not getting it off, and it's in such a bind that whatever you do, it's not coming off. Even whacking it with a hammer don't work. So we're gonna lift this up and try that. Yeah, you see that angle coming off now? A little more. And the reason I don't mind doing this is whenever you do this, this suspension, it's isolated on the vehicle. All of them are. So you can lift the whole knuckle. That's the whole design of the shock absorption, lower control arm, and all that. That's the whole design, is this is meant to be isolated. So you can take this and lift this up as much as you need to, and it won't affect the weight distribution of the vehicle while it's on a jack. So that's why I'm so confident in doing this. I can lift it up more if I need to. But I think that's all I'm going to want to do. See how less of an angle there is on this now? It's almost at a 90-degree angle, whereas before it was almost at maybe a 50 or 45-degree angle. So now I'm going to stick my ball joint in there, and maybe it'll come out now. So let's try that. Alright, so now that I got it at an angle, let's see if this will finally break out of its bind. And you got to be careful. Sometimes this will scare you. It'll go BAM! And pop out. Yep, there it is. So just like that, that's popped out. Now sometimes it's even worse than that. This one wasn't so bad. I remember one time I was doing, I think it was the back left tire, and I had to do something with the tie rod. And undoing it, and it was in such a bind, and I was scared I was going to strip the threads, until finally, boom, it finally unclocked. And of course, it was a loud bang and loud movement, so that scared me a good amount. So just be prepared. Sometimes you will have to put some good oomph into it. This time I was pretty lucky. I didn't have to do as much force, but I'm sure angling it helped out. So now that that's off, we can loosen this guy up here. And just like that, he's loose. Now I just got to undo this nut, pull him right out, and we'll be good to go. Just remember, do not turn the ball joint. Let's see if I can just loosen this behind me. Alright, so that's out, and that's out and about. So like before, I want to give y'all kind of a little bit of an example of what it looked like. I don't know if you'll have a good view of this. Let me see here if you'll have a good view. Yeah, so you'll have a good view. So beforehand, so from this view, it's not gonna really show how level it is right now, but beforehand it was like really in a bind. So I'll just use this little angle here as an example. So this is how much of a bind it was in. You know, it's not really straight, but as we straightened it out, see how it's at a 90-degree angle now? So now that I did that, it was able to just slide out like so. So now that that's done, we can lower this whole module or this assembly back down, and we can get to our shock absorber. Alright, now that our tie rod is off, we can focus on removing the shock absorber. Just like the front, first thing we're going to do is we're going to release the top nuts, then we'll release the bottom ones. For the top, as you can see here, you got a little sealing here, so you're going to have to use a wrench. Remember, these are 15 millimeters. If you have one of these ratchet wrenches, let's see, like one of these wrenches right here, this will help you a lot. That way you're not spending as much time taking it off and then loosening it again. Just rip, rip, rip. For the bottom, once the top is done, you're going to switch back to the bottoms, and remember, these are 13 millimeters, top and bottom. Now, for this one, it's a little different. It's not like the lower control arm on the front where it's just straight on. This one's angled down, so as soon as you loosen this, this strut is most likely going to bolt forward. So be careful and watch your hands, especially since it's so close to the hub. So once that's done, get your hands back. So now that we know how to do this, let's put it into practice. Alright, so first, like I said, we're going to take off the top nuts, and the ratcheting wrenches will definitely help out with that. So that's loose. Get him off there. Come on. So that's one. Come to the next one. Come on. There's a little bit of a weird spot. Okay, let's do this then. Off there, slide him off without losing it behind there. There you go, and there's the second one. Now that those are off, we can move down to the bottom ones. Alright, so now we're taking care of the bottom ones, and remember, you're going to need two 13mm sockets, one for the top, one for the bottom, and then just start ratcheting it off. And remember, this one's going to just fly right off most likely because of its angle. So you're going to want to be careful when taking it off. Come on. So I'm going to go ahead and take this one out, just so I don't have to deal with it being in a bind. So there's that one. Alright, so as you can see, the bolt's down here, and there's not a lot of space because of the hub, so one thing you're going to have to use is either a wrench in a socket or a crescent wrench in a socket, which is what I'm using today, because I don't have a 13mm wrench, so we're doing it this way. So there's my crescent wrench, and I'm going to loosen it up here, and it most likely will end up in a bind because of the angle of the shock. So let's just see what happens, and we'll play it by ear. So the nut's out now. Come on. Alright, so there's the nut. Let's see how much in a bind this is. Oh yeah, this is in a little bit of a bind. Okay, so you can either unscrew it out or bang it out. Either one of the two. I'm going to try my hand and smack it out a little bit. Okay. A little more. Alright, so we almost got the bolt out, and I do want to show y'all something here. As you can see, this bolt is so long it's starting to hit the hub right here and the joint. So you're going to want to be real careful with the spot as you take out this bolt. If anything, you may want to take this bolt out first and then do that one. So now that we have seen that and you know what to look for while you're removing this, let's continue. Cool. Alright, so we finally got that bolt out, and it was starting to go into this CV joint. I'm sure you can see it. It was starting to go into there a good amount, which I did not like at all. I was actually afraid it was going to rip the boot. And this is according to the service manual, by the way. So it was pretty a dumb design, if you ask me. So that bolt is now out. Check this here. Okay, yeah, this joint's good. There's a little dent in it, but it is an old CV joint. So, but that is where I was hitting the joint. You can kind of see a little bit of it frayed right there. Man, I don't like that at all. So anyway, so that's that. We now have both of the bolts out, and now this thing is pretty loose. As you can see, we can jiggle it a little bit. So now that that's out, we can try to remove it. Alright, so now that the top and the bottom bolts are undone, all we have to do now is take our strut, and it'll be a little bit of a push, just like that, so you may have to use a little more force, but just take it, slide it to the back and out, and there goes your strut. That wasn't as bad as the first one, or the fronts. So now that that's out, we have all the space, and this is also the perfect time, if you wanted to do your upper control arm. You can only do the upper control arm when the strut's out, by the way, so go figure. So if you plan on doing your upper control arm, or plan on doing your strut shock absorber, it's a good time to do your upper control arm as well. So now that that's all done, let's get the new one inside. Alright, now when it comes to putting in the strut, if you have the OEM, just slide it on in there. If you have the adjustable one, I'd shrink it down a little bit, that way it's easier to fit in. You're going to take it, slide it up in there, and then set it in place, like so. Why are you not going in? That's right. There we go. Slide it in just like so. And then we're going to take our bolts. We're going to slide them into place. Then we're going to take our new nuts right here and here. And we're going to put them on top. These are 14 or 15 millimeter, I believe. But we're going to go ahead and put those in here. I would make sure that the top nuts are secured first and then do the bottom ones. Whenever you do the top ones, make sure you get those nice and tight. Then after that, throw in your bolts down here, get them snug, and then adjust your ride height. That way it's not too small, and it's not pulling everything together, because you want it at the correct ride height unless you want a low ride height. Me, I want it around stock, so I'm going to fit it in there and adjust it to where it's right at the right height, and it's not pulling, it's not pushing, it's right at where I want it to be. So we're going to put these in and those, get them all snug and tight, and then we'll adjust the right height. Alright, so we have the tops nice and tight, like I said. These you can't really torque down, which suck because there's no real access into this area unless you have some kind of special tool, which I don't, so it's more of getting a wrench and tightening it on as tight as I can. So if you don't have a 15 millimeter, which is what I believe, you can use a 9/16 on these new nuts for the coilovers. And as you can see down here, I still have a little bit of space, so I'm going to have to increase the ride height in order to get that down into the spot that I need it to. One thing I do want to address is, you can see here there's an adjustment knob, but it's so close to the bottom. As you can see, it's starting to, it's touching there, the top of this ceiling. And DDM Works has some caps that you can drill a hole into this. That way it gives more room, it's not touching this here, and that way you're able to adjust it on the fly as well. And you could remove the cap, adjust it, and put it back on for later. So I don't have that. I wish I did. Now I see why they include those, but there still should be no problem with this, so that's good there. I'm gonna send it, and now we can increase the ride height, that way we can get this connected to the lower control arm. So let's get to that. Alright, now to lower this thing, you have the spring seat, the top ring, the locking collar, and then you have the final locking collar. In order to lower this, we need to turn the middle collar counterclockwise or left. So act like you're loosening it, and that'll drop it down. So that's what I'm going to do here. Alright, so I do want to show y'all something, and it's kind of redneck if you ask me. Well, it is redneck. So come down here. As you can see, I have your one bolt down here with a nut on the bottom, but on this side I kind of, did it the way I'm not supposed to. So I took the bolt and I slid it in through the bottom, because let's be honest, there's no way you're going to get that bolt in there unless you take off this centric hub, and let's be honest, this will never touch that. This whole thing moves in an assembly. It's not like these move individually on each other. So what I went ahead and did here is I just slid it through the bottom, and that's how we're going to do this. It's going to work. There's not going to be any issues with it. If you'd like to do it, you can do that as well, but this is how I'm doing it. And if you don't agree with it, that's alright. So now that that's in there, I'm going to lower it a little more. I had it just low enough to insert the bolts, and now I can lower it all the way and get these snug, and then I'll increase the ride height to where I need it to be. Alright, now that we got the ride height set where I wanted to, we have these lower ones nice and snug. To torque these down, they're 28 Newton meters or 21 foot-pounds of torque. Alright, so that one's done. Let's see if I can get this lower one here. Nope, it's spinning. Alright, we'll have to do that off camera, but these are now torqued down to spec, and we can move on to attaching our tie end rod. Alright, so now I'm going to lift this just like I did before. That way it's not as much of an angle, or as much of an angle. It's alright. It's the lower control arm. So now, as you can see, it clearly fits in. So we're good to go there. We can grab our nut and slide it right in. Just like so. And yes, I do need to replace this tie rod. The boot is torn up. So now that that's there, I'm going to grab my wrench and I'm going to grab my 8mm, make sure this tie rod stays still while I tighten on the nut. And we will get this nice and snug. Once it's snug, then I'll torque it on and then I'll let down the whole assembly. Alright, so now we got to torque this on. This will be 30 Newton meters or 22 foot-pounds, and this also is a torque to yield, so you'll have to do 150 degrees. Now of course there's not a lot of space once again, so it's kind of a not do it in one foul swoop, but many again, so we're gonna have to do that here. So let's go ahead and torque this on first, and then we'll torque to yield it. So torquing it on. So that's torqued on. Now all we got to do is do 150 degrees. Alright, so now we just got to torque it to 150 degrees. So let's do this. So there's 84 degrees. And there's 150. Now that that's done, we can put on our tire. Of course, don't forget to lower your jack. Move that out of the way. And don't forget your jack stand. Grab that guy, set him to the side. Now that those are out of the way, now we can attach our tire. Alright, now we can put our tire on. Up here. Make sure it's in line with the hub and the studs. Like so. Nope, that was not in line. There we go. Alright. Get it nice and flush. Get it nice and seated. Now we can grab our lug nuts. Don't forget your 3/4 or your 19mm. Once again, we're going to do the star pattern. So at the top, move down to the bottom right. Okay. Go up to the top left. Okay. Move on to the top right. Right. Alright, that's good. Go over to the bottom left. Okay, that one's good. Back to the top. Yep. Back down. Okay, over. Good. Right. Good. Down. Good. Alright, so now that those are done, it's nice and seated. Now we can lower the jack, and then we can torque these to spec. Alright, so now before I torque everything to spec, I want to make sure the right height is okay, which it is right now. I have it even with the other side, and I haven't done the other side yet, so this is where I'm going to keep it for now until, you know, the other side is done, and then I may lower it just a tad so that it doesn't have a huge gaping space there. Maybe half an inch, we'll see. But anyways, now that the right height is good, now we can go to torque on these lug nuts. Alright, so now we're going to torque these to spec. Remember, these are 100 foot-pounds of torque. I don't know the Newton meters, but 100 foot-pounds of torque. So now we're going to torque these on here. Once again, do the star pattern. One. Bottom right. Top left. To the right. and left. It's good. One more pass. Make sure everything's seated. It's good. 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 And good. Alright. Now that that is done, you have completed this procedure and you can do it to the other side of the vehicle now. Good job. Alright, thank you all so much for checking out the video. I hope that it helped you out and that you learned something new. I want to remind y'all, as always, to check out the Kaswell's Kappa.wixsite.com. There's a lot of great info on there, especially regarding the Kappa platform, Saturn Sky, Pontiac Solstice, even the Opel GT and the Daewoo G2X. Will trick you there. So a lot of great info on there, brochures, paint charts, service manual pages, TSBs, the whole shebang. Be sure to check it out. And as always, I will see y'all next time. Until then.